fourth attribute is, on Lamed Daled, Shehiyu oznav notos tamid lishmoya hatov. That his ears should constantly be tilting to hear the good. This apparently is also an aspect of keser. Umnam shemashav o megune lo yikanes behem klal. But some rumor or some improper, unholy speech he should not allow to come into his ears at all. And this would be like keser, where we said that keser is the origin of the Yud Gimel Midos of Rachamim. And even though through keser, ultimately there's an expression of judgment, for example, through bina and through Devorah, and that would be din. We said that din is not negative. That judgment is actually allowing people who have fallen short of the mark to know that they need to correct themselves and perfect themselves, so that it's ultimately good. But within keser, there's no din at all. There's only goodness. One aspect of that goodness is allowing people who fall short of the mark further down the road in order to do tshuva and correct themselves and perfect themselves. But in keser, it's only good. It's not expressed as din at all. And therefore, just like keser has no negativity, so there should not be in a person's ears any negativity. Kederach shesod ha'ozona elyona, this would be like the mystery of the supernal hearing. Meaning, in keser, shum tza'akos din, there is no recollection of din. V'lo p'gam loshen hara nichnas sham, nor is there anything evil, nor is there anything that bespeaks evil of anybody in keser. Why? Because keser is kula rachamim. And therefore, if there's any mention of judgment, it's in spheros lower down, like I just mentioned a minute ago. For example, in Devorah, where sometimes the chesed of Hashem has to be translated as din in order to warn people of their misdeeds or to enable them to atone for the damage that they've caused, where ultimately, in both cases and others as well, it's for the good of the person. So there, it is relevant for there to be an expression of din. But since the purpose of all of that is for good, and everything originates in keser it's all good. There's no mention of din in keser. People's faults and transgressions are not mentioned there. Therefore, a person who wants to emulate keser in this aspect should also be careful that he should not listen to anything other than good things about other people and things that will be beneficial and helpful in some way. But any other type of speech or matters, hamagbirim kas, which cause anger, tension, dislike, and rupture, lo ya'azin alem klal. He should not listen to these things at all. Don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear lashon hara. I don't want to hear slander. I don't want to hear impure speech. I don't want to hear about violence, sex. I don't want to hear about anything damaging, harmful, impure, unholy. Why? Because I want to emulate as much as possible keser. And therefore I don't want to impure and taint myself. That would prevent me from aspiring and attaining the level of keser. And just like the serpent and its venomous speech and its forked tongue, it doesn't say forked tongue, it just says tongue. But red men say white men speak with forked tongue, which means, speaking like two-faced, like speaking speaking with duplicity. So anyway, the language, the venom, the speech, and the falsehood of the Satan, of the Nachash, Eno nichnas lamala. It does not go upward into that realm of keser, as we said, because the Nachash is also a tool for good. The Nachash presents people with free will, and it's that free will which is ultimately for their best good. the flip side of that is that that if a person does not live up to challenge properly and falls short and therefore gives way to temptation and doesn't exercise properly his power of free will, so the forked tongue, right, goes both ways. It on the one hand induces and seduces a person to transgress, and then when a person does, takes the first opportunity to speak evil about that person. That's the duplicity of the Satan. It says, do it, and then when you do it, it smacks you for having done it. But that's all below. None of that gets to Keser. So therefore also, Kach lo yikones elav shum davar maguna, a person should not let anything impure come into himself. Vainu lo tiso shemashav, and this is what it means in the verse, don't support a false tale, where the pashup shot means, right, don't spread slander. But I think the author is quoting it here for suggesting a different nuance, as an additional nuance as well, which is lo tisa shemashav, means don't uphold, don't take and maintain something which is negative. Right? Don't take it into yourself. Kol sheken shar hamegune shelo yikanes lo'ozno klal. All the more so, not only, let's say, slander or a rumor, all the more so improper speech. Shelo yikanes lo'ozno klal. You should not let go into your ears at all. V'lo tieh kosheves ela al dvarim hatovim. And a person should only listen to good things, beneficial things that are going to help a person. And therefore, for example, listening to conversations which are lewd, or watching movies, or listening to music, which is, let's say, violent, so forth and so on, is really not good for a person. It abuses and erodes a person's spiritual sensitivity, and it's going to prevent a person from preserving the sanctity of the meat of Keser, which we're trying to attain here and we're trying to emulate.
But the Torah itself has all kinds of negative things in it, right?
But that's for the purpose of either elevating those negative things in order to redeem the positive aspects, or to learn from them in order to refrain from doing them.
Oftentimes art, like a film might have negative aspects in it, but you're supposed to learn from the film.
Yeah,
Positive message.
Yeah, that might be. And again, I'm not. I made a blatant statement. There might be exceptions. People have interests. People have a need to make a livelihood, and so forth and so on. But in general, a person should try and guard himself as much as possible from being tainted by improper things. And even if a documentary, for example, might be informative and educational, if the images and the ideas are graphic or improper, then a person might have to decide whether the advantage of the education aspect outweighs the harm of being exposed to the negative things that it includes. The following documentary, right, has graphic presentations. Right? Viewers' discretion is advised. So a person has to decide, use the discretion to what extent and when and how and what circumstance, for what reason, what purpose a person should be exposed to these things. Yeah.
What about exposure to scientific theories that contradict biblical teaching? Because for me personally, that definitely dulls my sensitivity. And as much as I love science, and but it's certainly, the conflict is constantly in my head.
Yeah.
And it's, on the one hand, it is knowledge, and it's coming from, unbiased, so to speak, scientific sources. But on the other hand, it really does erode one's faith.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, it's from a purely, let's get everybody to follow the Torah perspective. Something like studying science is more harmful than hearing lewd speech or watching a lewd movie.
Yeah, and we find don't stray after your hearts and after your eyes. Straying after your eyes is referring to nudity, sexual immorality, and the prohibition to harbor these lewd thoughts. Lo sasur achei levavchem is referring to straying after thoughts of heresy, which include idolatry, but even ideas that might cause a person to disbelieve in God and the Torah. On the other hand, certainly in today's day and age, a person can't live like an ostrich with his head in the sand. And there's at least a general knowledge of science, which every lay person should probably have some general exposure to, and that would probably be okay. If a person has a predisposition to be, to investigate in science, and the person feels that there are specific ideas that for him certainly seriously challenge a belief in God or practice, so then person that would require some examination. It might be that those ideas do not necessarily contradict the Torah, or it might be that they contradict certain, let's say, traditional understandings of Torah, but might synchronize with other presentations of the Torah ideas, which might not be traditional, but not necessarily antithetical to the Torah teachings either. So there might be a way of reconciling those differences. But by and large, I think that short of a person who, let's say, is some type of a science geek, right, or somebody who has a real strong predilection and interest in science, your average person should not make a point of avoiding ideas which are part of the current scientific paradigm, as long as he understands that paradigm is constantly changing anyway. So even if it seems to be correct now and based on unbiased research, that was thought to be the case 100 years ago, and paradigms have shifted so many times since then, and it might happen as well again. Number one. Number two, open up the mind and the possibility of there being ways of reconciling the seeming contradiction. And if he can do that, then that would be helpful for other people who might be presented with these ideas, fear that they challenge Torah, don't find a way of reconciling. And this person's ability to, let's say, learn Torah and also science could help him reconcile what seems to be a contradiction for many people. So it could be helpful. Again, it's hard to give a pat answer for everybody,
right,
but it's going to depend on the person and the context and the purpose for which he's doing this.
Well, I think that unless somebody has a pretty sophisticated understanding of the science, or a sophisticated, one could erode the other. You can deny the scientific consensus, or you could deny the truth in Torah, if you have an unsophisticated understanding of either.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, if you have a sophisticated understanding of both, then you're like,
I don't think,
or at least if you have like a somewhat sophisticated.
Personally, I don't think that should be a reason to avoid sophistication in whatever field he's interested in.
Right.
Even if it means temporarily, which might be for decades, having questions which aren't answered.
Right. I mean that's basically where it's at.
Right.
And
a person could ultimately find basis for faith and belief, even if it seems to contradict science.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a person can live with that seeming contradiction.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it really is a personal, and subjective answer, but I think that's the general. That would be my opinion. It shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. And depending on the person and the context and the purpose, it might be encouraged. It could be a good beneficial thing.
But you wouldn't say that science would fall under under this categorization of either lewd or harmful sort of.
Well,
I know Maimonides would say no. Maimonides says that there's never a contradiction between.
Yeah.
And if there is, then you don't understand one or the other properly.
I think it certainly could. I mean, I agree with you that if it would lead a person to disavow God and the faith and practice, then it probably would be included in what he's discussing here.
Okay.
But with that being said, and if that were the case, then such a person should probably be discouraged from going into it too much. To the extent to which a person can kind of juggle that tension, or work on resolving it, so then it would not necessarily have to be discouraged. Yeah. Okay, let's stop here.